This list didn't come from a record label. It didn't come from critics. It didn't come from a countdown show. It came from you. And judging by how fast the comments rolled in, this list hit a nerve. Because these are the bands you don't always name first. But the second you hear them, something clicks. You remember the car you were in, the room you were in, the version of yourself that didn't know yet how fast time moves. These aren't one-hit wonders. They're not classic rock royalty either. They're the bands you forgot you loved until someone reminded you. So let's walk through the list together. And fair warning, you may find yourself arguing with the order before we're done. We're starting with a band that perfected the art of sounding effortless. Little River Band. Little River Band didn't feel flashy, and they didn't feel loud. They just felt right. Their harmonies were smooth without being sleepy. Their songs slipped onto the radio and never really left. This was music that didn't demand attention. It earned it. And that's part of why they get overlooked. They made it look too easy. But go back and listen closely. The songwriting is airtight. The melodies are built to last. Little River Band didn't chase trends. They quietly outlasted them. Next up is a band that somehow managed to be mysterious and massive at the same time. Supertramp. Supertramp lived in a strange space, too artsy for pure pop, too melodic for hard prog, too big to be niche. And yet, everyone knows their songs. They were introspective without being pretentious, complex without being cold. So Supertramp made music for people who like to think, but still wanted to sing along. And maybe that's why they don't get talked about enough now. They don't fit neatly into a box. But if you grew up with them, you didn't forget them. You just stopped realizing how much they shaped your taste. Now let's move into territory where debates usually start. Steely Dan fans don't casually like Steely Dan. They defend them. This was a band that refused to play by the usual rules. They didn't tour like everyone else. They didn't write simple songs. They didn't care if you thought they were rock enough. They cared about precision, about tone, about craftsmanship. Steely Dan wrote music that rewards attention. The more you listen, the more you hear. And while they may not get shouted out as often as other bands from the era, their influence is everywhere. Once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Now let's shift gears, because this next band owned the open road. Marshall Tucker Band. The Marshall Tucker Band wasn't about flash. They were about feel. Their music felt like movement, like distance, like windows down and nowhere specific to be. They blended Southern rock with jazz, blues, and country in a way that felt natural, not forced. And for a long time, they were everywhere. But somewhere along the way, their name stopped getting mentioned. Even though their sound never really left. That's the thing about bands like this. They become part of the atmosphere. You stop noticing them until they're gone. Now let's talk about a band people remember, but don't always take seriously enough. Blue Öyster Cult. Blue Öyster Cult had range. They could be heavy, or they could be melodic. They could be mysterious. They weren't just a hard rock band, they were storytellers. Their songs had mood, their image had intrigue, their sound lived somewhere between mainstream and cult favorite, and maybe that's why they get underestimated. But this band wasn't an accident. They built something intentional.